On November 4th, the CEO and chair of the Nasdaq, a woman who sits on top of a $31 trillion equities market, walked onto a stage in New York City. Not a crypto stage, not a fintech panel, a Ripple stage. Adena Friedman didn't talk about Bitcoin. She didn't talk about Ethereum. She talked about modernizing the financial system's plumbing alongside the DTCC, the entity that clears virtually every stock trade in America. And while she was speaking, the price of XRP was bleeding. Retail was panic posting. The headlines were screaming about a government shutdown, choppy markets, and where's the pump? Now ask yourself the brutal question. Why does the chairwoman of the most important stock exchange on earth fly across town to share a stage with Ripple at the exact moment the asset looks weakest? Why are Downing Street and the White House taking private meetings with a single blockchain company while CNBC tells you crypto is dead? These events are not disconnected. They are the same event, viewed from two different altitudes. And what Monica Long just confirmed on camera, quietly, almost in passing, is that the bridge between traditional finance and digital assets is no longer being built. It is finished. They're just waiting to flip the switch. Let me pull back the curtain. Today we decode the Ripple Swell signal, the one the mainstream missed while it was busy watching red candles. No hype, no moonboy fantasies, just the structural reality of what was said, what was not said, and why the world's largest financial institutions are positioning while retail is still arguing on social media. Before we go under the surface, none of this is financial advice. This is structural analysis. Let's jump in. Let's start with the hard truth. 90% of the people who watched the Monica Long interview heard the words but missed the architecture. They heard acquisitions and thought company growth. They heard stablecoin strategy and thought another USDC competitor. They heard prime brokerage and tuned out. That is not what was said. What was said is something far bigger. Monica laid out clearly on camera that Ripple is no longer a payments company. Ripple is now what she called the end-to-end digital asset infrastructure provider. Read that phrase again slowly. End-to-end digital asset infrastructure. That is not the language of a startup. That is the language of a sovereign-grade financial utility. Look at the pieces she confirmed are now under one roof. Cross-border payments, the original mission, now operating with over 75 regulatory licenses globally. Custody, through Metaco, Standard Custody, and now Palisade, announced this very week. Liquidity infrastructure, via Hidden Road, now rebranded as Ripple Prime. Stablecoin issuance, RLUSD DFS, regulated out of New York. Treasury management, through the G-Treasury partnership, targeting corporate treasuries that move trillions annually. The XRP Ledger itself, with a native DEX, upcoming lending protocol, and tokenization rails. Now here is the part retail investors keep missing. These are not separate products. They are the complete stack of services that a modern financial institution needs to operate on blockchain rails. Custody, settlement, liquidity, compliance, treasury, issuance. Every single layer of the financial pipe, owned, regulated, and operational under one roof. You see, retail investors stare at the spot price. But financial institutions, they stare at the integration map, and the integration map just got completed. Let's do the math that the crowd ignores. Monica name-dropped two markets in that interview that most viewers didn't even register. The first was corporate treasury, the G-Treasury partnership. According to the CEO of G-Treasury, corporate treasurers are responsible for the majority of global money transmission annually. We're talking about a market measured not in billions, but in tens of trillions of dollars, moved every single year through corporate cash management. The second was post-trade clearing and settlement, the world Adena Friedman operates in. The DTCC settles roughly $2 quadrillion in securities transactions annually. Yes, you read that correctly. Quadrillion. With a Q. Now do the math. Cross-border payments alone are a $150 trillion annual market. Forex moves $7.5 trillion every single day. The derivatives market sits north of $1.2 quadrillion in notional exposure. And every single one of these markets has the same structural problem. Slow settlement, locked nostro/vostro capital, and trust gaps between counterparties. Monica said it directly. XRP is positioned as the bridge asset, not just for currency pairs, but, and listen carefully to her exact phrasing, if we project into the future, other tokenized real-world assets. That long tail might not always have liquidity for the asset cross, and so that's where XRP is the bridge. She just told you on camera that XRP is being engineered as the liquidity bridge for the entire tokenized real-world asset market. A market that BlackRock's Larry Fink has publicly stated will eventually swallow every stock, bond, and fund on Earth. Here's the math. The fixed cap is 100 billion XRP. Roughly 55 to 57 billion are circulating. Tens of billions remain in escrow, released and largely relocked monthly. If even a fraction of a percent of the tokenization wave routes through XRP as a bridge, and that is exactly what the infrastructure is being built to do, the supply-to-demand equation becomes mathematically incoherent at current prices. This isn't a prediction. This is the logical outcome of the design. Now let's talk about what Adena Friedman's presence actually meant, because this is where most analysts completely miss the signal. Nasdaq is not a crypto company. Nasdaq is the equities exchange. They list Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Tesla. Their CEO does not fly to a side event to talk shop. When Adena Friedman shares a stage with Brad Garlinghouse and Monica Long, that is a diplomatic signal from one financial empire to another. And what was the substance of her message? Monica summarized it perfectly. Friedman delivered tangible proof points of some of the work that she's doing with DTCC and others in the industry to modernize the infrastructure. Let me translate that. Nasdaq and the DTCC, the two entities that, together, define how American securities markets function, are publicly aligning their modernization roadmap with the blockchain infrastructure Ripple is building. This is not speculation. This was said on camera at a Ripple event by the CEO of Nasdaq herself. Ask yourself this brutal question. Does the CEO of Nasdaq share a stage with a blockchain company without absolute legal certainty about where the regulatory environment is heading? Absolutely not. She does not gamble. She positions. And it doesn't stop there. Monica confirmed. Brad Garlinghouse is meeting with Patrick Witt from the White House on day 2, direct executive branch engagement. Chris Larson appearing with Jose Andres of World Central Kitchen, proof of humanitarian aid deployment on RLUSD rails. Ripple Prime, formerly Hidden Road, now operating under the Ripple banner, providing prime brokerage to institutional traders, the same infrastructure tier that services hedge funds and family offices. This is not retail FOMO. This is calculated positioning by market makers, custodians, and government officials, who already know what the public hasn't yet been told. While the masses panic about red candles, the smart money is signing NDAs, integrating APIs, and quietly moving infrastructure into production. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of 95% of the market. Drop a comment with the word bridge, so I know who's actually paying attention. Hit subscribe if you want every signal decoded the moment it drops. Now let's go deeper, because what's coming in the next 2 quarters is where the architecture gets activated. Here are the catalysts Monica all but spelled out. Catalyst 1, crypto market structure legislation. Monica directly referenced the expected robust conversation about policy outlook and the crypto market structure bill in the White House meeting. Once that framework lands, the legal ambiguity that has kept Tier 1 banks on the sidelines vanishes overnight. The wait-and-see money becomes all-in money. Catalyst 2, stablecoin expansion on the XRPL. RLUSD is live. Euro-denominated stablecoins are being built. Monica explicitly described the XRPL as the settlement layer for stablecoin pairs, with XRP as the bridge currency facilitating FX between them. Every new stablecoin launched on the ledger increases the structural demand for XRP as the neutral routing asset. Catalyst 3, lending protocol. Monica confirmed the next major XRPL amendment is a native lending protocol. This transforms XRP from a payment bridge into a collateral asset within a DeFi-grade lending system, a use case that locks supply for extended duration. Catalyst 4, tokenized real-world assets. This is the quiet giant. Ripple's infrastructure stack, custody, compliance, liquidity, and the ledger itself is being positioned to onboard the tokenization wave that Larry Fink, Franklin Templeton, and the BIS have all publicly endorsed. When the regulatory switch flips, these catalysts don't activate in sequence. They activate simultaneously. Here is what the retail crowd is not pricing in. We are moving from an era of abundance to an era of scarcity. Every Palisade-grade custody integration, every G-Treasury corporate client, every Ripple Prime institutional account, these are not retail flows. These are tokens moving into multi-signature institutional vaults. And once a token enters an institutional vault, it does not come back to market for a 10% profit. It is gone, held against Treasury liabilities, posted as collateral, locked into settlement obligations. The exchange reserves of XRP are quietly draining. The escrow releases are being relocked. And the demand pipeline being built by Ripple's institutional stack is preparing to absorb supply at a velocity the open market is not structured to handle. The institutions have spent the last several years using the chop, the FUD, the regulatory uncertainty, and the boredom to shake out weak hands so they could take your position. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is the observable behavior of every major market cycle in financial history. The exit liquidity of the confused funds, the entry of the informed. When the final integration goes live and the policy framework lands, the retail window doesn't slowly close. It snaps shut. The risk premium evaporates. The price gaps, and the people who waited for confirmation discover that confirmation and entry are mutually exclusive events. I know it's tough to watch the red candles. I know the headlines create fear. I know that when you check the price after watching a Ripple Swell announcement and see it move sideways or down, your brain screams, none of this matters. But as an analyst, I'm trained to distinguish between noise and signal. The noise is the candle. The noise is the daily sentiment swing. The noise is whatever Twitter is screaming about this hour. The signal is the CEO of Nasdaq on a Ripple stage. The signal is the White House taking the meeting. The signal is 75 regulatory licenses quietly stacked across the globe. The signal is a corporate treasury partner that touches the majority of global money transmission. The signal is the completed end-to-end infrastructure stack that Monica Long just walked us through, line by line. Being early feels exactly like being wrong, right up until the moment reality catches up. And reality in this case is being assembled in plain sight by people who do not announce their moves on price prediction YouTube channels. The question isn't whether the infrastructure will activate. The infrastructure is already activated. The question is who will still be holding when the post-trade settlement layer of Nasdaq, the DTCC, and the global tokenization wave routes its liquidity through the bridge that has been quietly waiting for this exact moment. Price is a distraction. Architecture is the reality. Bitcoin's narrative requires you to be told to buy it. XRP's narrative requires you to understand why it has to exist. One is a marketing campaign. The other is a bridge. And bridges don't ask for permission. They get built, tested, certified, and then the world routes itself across them. Monica Long, Brad Garlinghouse, David Schwartz, Chris Larson, they have never once told you to buy XRP. They don't have to. They are too busy building the rails that the next financial system will run on. The Nasdaq just publicly acknowledged the bridge. The White House is taking the meetings. The infrastructure stack is complete. The catalysts are queued. History does not reward comfort. It rewards those who pay attention when the room is quiet. If you made it this far, you are not part of the crowd. You are part of the informed. And the informed don't chase. They position, stay patient, stay rational. And as we always do, we don't wait for the future. We plan for it. Because in a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. The bridge is finished. The switch is next.